And it is a parent information meeting. It is not a school board meeting. I have 2 school board members here tonight. We're not allowed to have more than that, otherwise it would have to be agendized as a school board meeting. So that's why we're missing 3 board members tonight on purpose. It's not a town hall meeting. If some people came here tonight thinking that this is going to be a town hall meeting where there are going to be speeches on one side or the other of this, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but that's not what this meeting is tonight. The reason we had it as an RSVP only event is that this is a meeting that from the beginning has been only for parents of elementary school children attending Oak Park USD schools. We recognize that on topics like this, that there can be sometimes a wider audience with a lot of different points of view, and that isn't the purpose of the meeting. It's for you, the parents of children in our schools, to learn more about what your children are going to be learning about, and to learn more about the topic so that you can support this topic at home. It's very important. And we also recognize that there are some concerns from some parents and probably some confusion about some of this, what the program is and what isn't. And we want to try to address that tonight through the presentation and then also through the opportunity of allowing you to ask questions via the system, which we're going to talk about in a minute. And then I had to be really clear about this. I only want to have to say this once, but I think everybody is here tonight because they want to learn something, and that the district operates something under a civility policy, that's board policy, and it reflects state law on this matter. And this is not a public meeting, it's a meeting that the school district is operating for a particular purpose. And so I have to read this to you so that you all pay attention. But if any member of the public uses obscenities or speaks in a demanding, loud, insulting, and or demeaning manner, or out of turn, the administrator or the employee to whom the remarks are directed will admonish the speaker to communicate civilly in the proper manner. So I've already done that. So if corrective action is not taken by the abusing party, the district employee will verbally notify the abusing party that their participation in the meeting is terminated, and that the offending person will be directed to leave the property. When an individual is directed to leave under the above circumstances, the superintendent or designee shall inform the person that they will be guilty of a misdemeanor in accordance with California Education Code Section 44811 and Penal Codes 415.5 and 626.7. If an individual refuses to leave upon request or returns before the applicable period of time, the superintendent, principal, or designee may notify law enforcement officials. And we have one of those with us tonight, and some of them the Ventura County Sheriff's Department here, and 2 security officers to make sure I don't usually have to start off the meeting by making that statement, but I just want to make sure that that it's a friendly meeting, it's a positive meeting, and it's an informative meeting, and that it doesn't degenerate into anything other than that. Tonight we have some. The process will be this is Stu Newman, our director of student support and school safety, and he's going to basically be the moderator for the meeting. We have Todd Walker, LCSW, licensed clinical social worker who lives in Oak Park and who services students in the area. And he's going to talk about the gender diversity and sexual orientation issues. We have our amazing elementary school counselors. They're going to outline the Character Counts program in the K-5 lessons, and I'll let Stu introduce them individually in a minute. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to talk about the opt-out issue, which has caused a lot of confusion, and I want to make sure that people understand how that would work or doesn't work in this place. And then we're going to have a Q&A session where you have the opportunity to ask a question using the QR code, which we're going to put up. And if that doesn't work on your phone, then you can write it down. And then we're going to sort through those questions and group them so we don't spend a lot of time answering the same thing all over again. And we're going to answer questions, not read out loud comments. And then when we have those questions, I don't want there to be a lot of cheering or questions or clapping on one side or the other of this. I just want the questions to be asked, and the responses will be directed from the people up here who are knowledgeable and able to respond to them. And if we get to the point where there are so many questions that we can't get to them, you have the option of putting your email on the form that you're going to do, and then we will email you back a response. So everybody will get their response. So if we're clear on that, then we'll go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Dr. Knight. Thank you, everybody, for coming this evening. At this time, I'd like to introduce Todd Walker. Todd Walker is a licensed clinical social worker. He's a graduate of the University of Southern California master's program in social work, where he completed his concentration in children and families, as well as sub-concentration in public child welfare. He received his bachelor's degree in psychology from Cal State University Northridge. Todd has spent the last 12 years in the field of social work, working with children, teens, and families in residential treatment, transitional housing, outpatient, and homeless services. In addition, he has also provided LGBTQ+ trainings for teachers and parents and students in the neighboring school districts and counties. Today, Todd holds the position of Chief Clinical Officer for Alva Walker Life Strategies, a licensed clinical social work corporation that works with families in this surrounding area. I'm really pleased to introduce Todd Walker.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. I'm going to be spending the next couple of minutes talking about gender identity and gender expression, specifically in school settings. So a little bit about what I'm going to be going over is LGBTQ 101, some of the accepting and rejecting behaviors and what they can cause, the local and national stats, specifically with suicidal ideation within this community, and lastly, the legal standards. So when we're talking about sexual identity versus gender identity, typically when I train, I start with sex assignment at birth. So we're strictly talking about biology and anatomy. We refer to this area as female, male, and intersex. Intersex is a combination of the chromosomes. We know that research tells us there are about 40 variations of how a person can identify as intersex. From there, we move on to gender identity. So this inner sense of gender, do I see myself more as a man, more as a woman, or do I identify as genderqueer? What also falls under this category is gender fluidity and gender nonconforming. Typically what I do with students I work with, as well as parents, is I'll ask that person to identify themselves. What does it look like for them? Just because the definitions can be quite interesting across the spectrum. From there, we move on to gender expression. So how does a person express and communicate their gender? Is it in a feminine way, a masculine way, or an androgynous way? Typically with androgynous, you're going to see a mixture of the two, if you will. And then lastly, sexual orientation. So with sexual orientation, we're talking about attraction. Previously, the definition that we would have utilized is who do we want to go to bed with? We really want to focus on attraction, so that emotional, physical attraction to another individual. What falls under this category is heterosexual, which is attraction to the opposite gender, bisexual, which is attraction to two of the genders, and then lastly, gay and lesbian, which is attraction to the same gender as your own. For gender identity, typically we see this develop about the ages of 2 to 6, and then for sexual orientation, typically it's around the ages of 6 to 12. Two terms I wanted to throw out there in these categories. The first one is cisgender, so CIS gender. Cisgender is when a person's sex assignment and gender identity match. So for myself, I identify as a cisgender man because my biological sex is male and my gender identity is man. When a person identifies as transgender, sex assignment and gender identity won't match. So if I was a transgender individual, my sex assignment could be male and my gender identity could be female. So moving on, talking a little bit more about attraction and gender. Gender identity and expression and orientation are not determined by body parts. So regardless of what body parts a person possesses, we do not infer that they therefore hold a certain identity, expression, orientation, etc. They're also distinct from one another. You do not need identity to have expression, to have orientation. With this, we really want to avoid assumptions. Often what happens in our communities, regardless of our LGBT identity, is we simply make assumptions about a person based on how they look. And then lastly, it's different than sexual behavior. So again, really separating out the physical act from attraction, okay? All right, looking at some of the rejecting behaviors and what impact this has specifically on the LGBTQ community, we see things like blaming, shaming, excluding, and name-calling, especially in school settings, increase things such as attempted suicide, high levels of depression, high risk for HIV, sexually transmitted infections and diseases, and then lastly, the use of illegal drugs. Some of these statistics that I pulled for you all, 30% of completed completed adolescent suicide in the United States identify as LGBTQ youth. LGBTQ youth are 5.5 times more likely to report a suicide attempt that required medical care. When we're talking about medical care, we're referring to having to go to an emergency room or potentially be hospitalized in a psychiatric facility. 78% of youth who identify as LGBTQ report being bullied or harassed in their communities, and LGBTQ youth are 2.5 times more likely to report medical levels of depression. A couple more statistics: 92% of LGBTQ youth say they hear negative messages about being LGBTQ. 31% of attempted suicides in the US were youth who identified as transgender. This study was specifically out of Massachusetts and was conducted by the Department of Public Health in 2009. We saw an increase in 2014 and 15. The study was conducted across the high school setting in Massachusetts for 9th through 12th graders. They found that 40% of transgender adults reported having made a suicide attempt, and 92% of these individuals reported attempting suicide before the age of 25. Lastly, this study was also broken down to take a look at some of the specific populations within the transgender umbrella. They found that 50% of trans male youth attempted suicide, 40% of non-binary youth attempted suicide, and lastly, 30% of trans female youth attempted suicide. For a trans male, this is a person who is transitioning to being a male. Trans female would be moving to female. For non-binary, typically what we see is someone who is not associating with the gender. Okay? On the flip side, some of the accepting behaviors and what can come of creating supportive environments and advocating in situations such as what our Unified is doing, you're going to see students that have higher self-esteem, better relationships with their friends, their teachers, their families, so on and so forth, and just better overall health. Lastly, taking a look at the federal and state laws that are currently in effect. So for California, all public school students are protected from bullying and harassment based on their actual or perceived sexual orientation or gender identity, and school personnel must intervene if they witness it. And California public school students have the right to access sex-segregated programs and activities, irrespective of the gender listed on their records. Essentially what that means is that in public schools in the state of California, a student is welcome to go into any restroom they choose, any sport curriculum, whatnot on a school setting if they want to join a specific team that is not typically associated with their gender. No, we are no longer able to intervene in those situations. California Department of Public Education, I threw these up in the ACLU. They're great resources just for how schools as well as parents and students can work together to get these situations, if you will, implemented in school settings, solely because this information is very new. Okay, and then just lastly, my contact information. Should you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to me directly.
Thank you, Todd. Appreciate it. If you can just give us 2 secs, we're just gonna change something up real quick.
Sorry about that. So I'm Holly Baxter. I'm the elementary counselor at Red Oak Elementary, and so glad to see you all here today. So some of the things I wanted to cover was about gender diversity in schools. And I wanted to point out, I'm so glad that Todd talked about the differences between gender diversity and sexual identity. We are not discussing sexual identity with your kids. In K through 5, we are purely discussing gender identity, not its relationship to attraction or who our kids are attracted to or not attracted to. That's not discussions that we are having in the classrooms. So I wanted to make that clear and let you know that studies show that by preschool, children really understand gender categories. They have an understanding of gender, and they begin to use gender-based language and rely on gender-based stereotypes in their play. And that's not just studies that we found, it's also the American Academy of Pediatrics that makes that association. Unfortunately though, 3/4 of gender non-conforming students report feeling unsafe in their schools. And that's a pretty alarming statistic for us to think that 3/4 of a certain group of students are feeling unsafe. For those K through 8 students who were identified, or even those who were perceived as gender non-conforming, and when I speak about gender non-conforming, I'm not just talking about transgender kids, non-binary kids, or gender fluid kids. I'm talking about the boy who has long hair, and I'm talking about the girl who likes to play sports. And those kids also get harassed and teased in our schools, unfortunately. And so of those groups, depending on what study you look at, 54 to 87% of them report being verbally harassed in school. 24 to 26% are reporting being physically assaulted in school. 13% report being sexually assaulted. And 17% of our gender non-conforming youth eventually leave school due to that maltreatment. So we're looking at what are the best practices then to help and support those students. And we find that school environments obviously play a really significant role in the social and emotional health of your kids, and that's cited by the American Academy of Pediatrics as well as many, many other resources. And that our ability to provide an inclusive and accepting community for those kids can be very preventative for some of these problems that we see and these outcomes that we see that can be negative, including decreasing in-school victimization. And we also do have an ethical obligation to ensure that our schools are safe, to ensure that our schools are free from verbal and physical harassment, including for that of gender non-conforming youth. And that is a statement by the National Association of School Psychologists. Additionally, in the best practices, we know that inclusive curriculum has a positive effect on the school experience of not only gender non-conforming students, but for all students, because that increase in a positive environment and that decrease in any kind of harassment, whether it be for the person who's being targeted or just others in the community, increases the positive environment for those students and then increases academic achievement and everything else across the board. Studies have found that when there's positive representations of gender non-conforming topics, that the negative comments about gender expression drops by 25%, and victimization drops by almost 50%, and feelings of safety regarding gender expression improves by over 30%. And again, that's not just for those kids that identify as transgender and non-binary, that's for all kids across the board as far as how they might be being teased because of how they express or don't express their particular gender. I want to take a quick look at what some other programs are doing. Here in LCSW, we really enjoy being on the leading edge of things and the cutting edge and really leading the way for a lot of things, but we also do look to other districts to see what they're doing, learn from them, and model things on what's been successful in other places. So some of those include in British Columbia, they have a program called SOGI 123. 58 out of 60 school districts participate, and every school participates, and it's an extremely comprehensive program, including staff and students in gender diversity education. Seattle Public Schools and San Francisco Public Schools also both have gender diversity lessons at their elementary levels, and 15 individual schools in the nation have received the Welcoming Schools Seal of Excellence. That Seal of Excellence comes with the promise to provide 3 gender diversity lessons to every child in the class every year. So that's what some of the other programs are doing. Now what we do is we have a Character Counts program, and our Character Counts program has been in place for over 15 years. Before I came to the district, the previous counselor went into classrooms and delivered lessons on our character traits. And we have a character trait just about once a month. Some of our months are combined just because there's a lot of holidays in there. And they include respect, responsibility, kindness, determination, cooperation, and acceptance. Up above, you'll see that each grade level receives a number of different topics, and we're in each classroom about once per month. Your counselor comes in and does a social emotional learning lesson in your classroom, and that's been going on for a long time. So these gender diversity lessons will be added to that existing structure and part of what we already do to come into the lessons and contribute to the social and emotional health of our kids. As far as the gender diversity lessons, I wanted to give you a quick just kind of overview before we get into the details of each individual one. It will be, again, a single lesson added to the existing character count structure. There has been some miscommunication in the news that it would be a monthly lesson. It's not. That it would be an ongoing conversation, and it's not that either. What it is a single lesson taking place in your child's classroom. Those lessons will begin in October. And in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and third grade, that's one 35-minute lesson. In the fourth and fifth grade, it's one 45-minute lesson. And each lesson begins with a book. We have the books out on display. You've seen them as you were coming in. Each lesson begins with a book that tells a story of different characters that demonstrate diversity and acceptance. So we go through the book, and as we go through the book, we stop on certain pages and might ask the kids, what do you think is going to happen? Or what do you think should happen? Those sorts of questions, which is how we present a lot of our literature in the elementary grades. And then afterwards, we'll have a brief discussion of some of the topics that might have been introduced by the book, and that's usually a more of a child-led discussion where we like to ask a question and let them really kind of engage in the material and talk about how they're thinking of it. And then we end with some kind of an art activity or different activity to bring the lesson home and have a little bit of fun. And those art activities are displayed here. And as we go through the lessons, we'll point out which one is associated with each grade. I wanted to really emphasize that our focus, the majority of these lessons, are talking about stereotypes and gender stereotypes and how we're all subject to these gender stereotypes and how we all feel pressure to conform to not just gender stereotypes, but other types of stereotypes of how a student should be, how a boy should act, how a girl should act. And we've all heard the adage, boys don't cry, and we work so hard to let our boys know that it's okay to have their feelings. And so those are some of the stereotypes that we're breaking down in these lessons, is not just, again, talking about those gender non-conforming kids who identify in different ways, but also gender stereotypes is a really big portion of what we're talking about. And also the right for each student to be who they are and express themselves in a way that makes sense for them. This will not include any discussion of biology, of personal choices of students. We will not be asking students to self-identify or to examine their own gender. And the lessons do affirm all identities, including he or she. I know there was also some information out that we were not allowed to refer to kids as he or she or boy or girl anymore. And I want to assure you that we have many, many, many boys and girls in our schools. And we have many, many kids that we refer to as he and she. What we do ask of our staff is to be inclusive. And so instead of saying boys and girls line up, say stars and stripes line up, artists and scholars line up, because we do have those kids who don't identify under one of those categories, and we want to make sure we're inclusive. We've also asked that instead of using things like the boys and the girls went to lunch, we say they went to lunch. And that's just an inclusive language sort of piece that we've asked our teachers, and I think that's where some of that confusion came about, but I wanted to take a second to kind of clear that up for you. Also, we're so thankful that we have really had the opportunity to meet with lots of parents who had questions and concerns or wanted to just know more. And through those conversations, through feedback from the community, feedback from the teachers, we have adapted a lot of the lessons and taken into account a lot of those comments and a lot of those things that were brought up as we've developed these lessons over the last few months. So they do look very different than they did when we were first presenting the lessons, because we were welcoming that community feedback and glad to take it into accordance. And so some of the definitions have been removed. Originally, we would be including the definitions for the children that you just heard from Todd Walker, that we would be letting the children know what transgender means, non-binary means. We are no longer providing those definitions to kids. We are not introducing that vocabulary. Also, our first and second grade lessons, we just flipped them, and we put what was originally the second grade lesson was red, and that's now the first grade lesson, and vice versa. The first grade lesson was originally neither, and that's now second grade. We just felt like that really better suited the developmental piece of how kids are learning about stereotyped behavior and those sorts of things. Also, now there is a single lesson that will be for both 4th and 5th grade. That is a lesson based on Jamie is Jamie. We'll be sharing with that sharing that with you in just a moment. And so that replaces what was originally in 4th grade a video that we decided not to use because it was a video utilizing somebody who wasn't a part of our district, wasn't a part of our program, and we didn't have control over what that person may do or not do. And we wanted to make sure that we were very clear about what our message is and not get it mixed up with somebody's message that's outside of our ability to kind of oversee. And then also our 5th grade book, we have removed that. Our original 5th grade book was A House for Everyone. We removed that from the curriculum, and we'll be using Jamie as Jamie for that grade as well. And we'll get a little more into that as we get into each grade level. Also, you will be receiving information. There are photocopied sheets of the information out already by the books, but you'll be getting that on Parent Square. All parents will be getting that on Parent Square 1 week prior to their student's lesson taking place. So you'll get that on at home. Make sure you check your Parent Square. And also the entire lesson schedule is online on our LPUSD Gender Diversity for Elementary Parents website, which has almost all the information that we're giving tonight is on that website as well. So that's already out there if you're interested to know when your child's lesson would be. All right, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to my co-counselor, Alana Schulman, who is the counselor at Oak Hills and also at Brookside on Friday mornings, and she's going to take care of kindergarten and first grade.
Put the mic closer.
Yeah, there you go.
Is it better?
Yes.
So I am the kindergarten counselor at Brookside and the elementary counselor at Oak Hills. I'm focusing on the kindergarten lesson, which is just a celebration of what makes all of your children unique. It is not a focus solely on the gender aspect, but on everything that we want to celebrate our kids for and encourage respecting the differences of, maybe someone's taller, maybe someone's shorter, different hair colors. So it's just introducing those topics of being unique and individual is amazing and something we want to celebrate and be excited about every day. And right in front of me is the art project that they are going to be doing. And it's just a self-portrait collage of the class and showcasing what makes each of them unique. We also just want to emphasize that all students have the right to express themselves in their unique way and that they should be accepted for that expression. And then for first grade, we have the book Red. This is a really cute story about a crayon with the different label on the outside. And our goal with this is to introduce the concept that we express parts of ourselves in a variety of ways. How you dress might not express how you feel, but it's a personal choice, and that there is not necessarily a stereotype or label that should be tied to the expression. And that there's just no right or wrong way for our kids to express who they are, and that we celebrate and encourage them to be themselves at our school and to feel safe doing so. And I will hand this over to Samantha King, our Brookside counselor.
Okay, so I'm going to introduce the second and third grade lessons to you. And I'm really excited to do that because I find them to be really wonderful lessons, and I hope you do too. So our first book is called Neither, and it is about a story of a little animal that lives in the land of this or that. And that animal is, when it hatches, it is not a blue bunny, it is not a yellow chick, and it doesn't fit in either area. It's kind of a combination of both. And very quickly, the other animals say, well, you are neither. You're not part of us. And when this animal tries to go and be part of the blue bunnies, it's not accepted. And when the animal tries to go and be part of the yellow chicks, it's not accepted. And so this animal decides it has to go find a place where it belongs, and it ends up finding in the land of all. And that is where everyone is accepted. And so this lesson really kind of teaches us about acceptance and inclusion, and that there aren't just two options. There aren't students that are either smart or dumb. There aren't students that are good or bad. We're all somewhere in the middle, and we need to accept each other for those differences. And so then for the second part of the lesson, after we kind of talk about that, then we're going to move on and do an activity. And the activity, if you look down at the bottom of the stage, is a banner there, and each child will be given a letter, and we will be creating the sign that says, friends are always welcome, and each student will be creating a sign and kind of decorating it, and then we'll be displaying it in their classroom. And so that's kind of the second grade lesson. And the lesson focus there will be talking about that there isn't an either or an or. And so that there's kids in the middle, there's students have all different types of things that make them special, and we want to embrace that. And it also lets them know that we talk about that feeling left out hurts, which is a really important topic for second graders. So that's the second grade lesson. And the third grade lesson is a story called Sparkle Boy. And Sparkle Boy is the story about a little boy who loves things that are sparkly. He loves sparkly bracelets, and he loves sparkly nail polish and sparkly skirts, and his sister does not accept him at first. And at first she makes him feel kind of bad, and his parents are supportive of him expressing himself however he wants. And then they go to the library one day, and the other students start to tease and make fun of him for expressing himself however he feels comfortable. And so his sister stands up for him and protects him, and realizes that it's really important to be an upstander and protect those who don't have a voice. And so that's kind of the message that we're sending with Sparkle Boy. After we kind of read through the book, we're going to talk about gender stereotypes and things like Holly mentioned before, that it's okay for a boy to have long hair. It's okay for a girl to wear sports shorts, that we aren't in these boxes, and that we all are somewhere in between. And then for activity, we're going to be creating posters where students are going to, and you see them up here, I believe they're right around here, where they talk about how students can be, things they can see to be an upstander at school. So we're kind of getting them to teach them that vocabulary to go out there and communicate with each other in a positive and safe way. Some of the focuses on that lesson will be talking about gender spectrum. And when we're talking about gender spectrum, we're going to be discussing it with the students, explaining that there are boys and there are girls, and there are lots of students in between. And it's all okay, and it's wonderful. And that's basically is kind of how we're going to discuss the gender spectrum with students. And we're also going to talk to them about what upstandards are and how they can help each other when they're in difficult situations. So that's kind of an overview of the second and third grade lessons. All right, I am happy to go over the fourth and fifth grade lesson, as I said. So this is the same book will be used for both lessons in fourth and fifth grade. And that book is Jamie is Jamie. And Jamie is Jamie tells the story of a child who comes to school for the first time. It's his first day, or it's their first day at a new school. And Jamie comes to play, and Jamie's playing with the trucks. And then Jamie's helping with the baby dolls. And then Jamie is coloring, and Jamie leaves the school for the day, and the other kids start talking about how much fun they have with Jamie, and one says, I can't wait till he comes back, and the other one says, I can't wait till she comes back.
and they have a discussion, wait a second, is Jamie a boy or a girl? And they come to the realization that it didn't really matter, that Jamie is just Jamie. And when they come to school the next day, now all of a sudden the dolls are riding in the trucks, and the boys and the girls are playing together instead of separate, and Jamie is playing with everybody. And it's a very sweet story about being accepted for who you are and not needing to fit into boxes or stereotypes in order to play. So the focus of that lesson is again promoting that acceptance and awareness of the gender spectrum and understanding that gender can be expressed in many ways, and each individual has a right to express that gender in the way that is most comfortable to them. And that expressing that in a stereotypical way is not a prerequisite to be a friend, and it's not a prerequisite to play, that we can all accept each other for who we are and how we express ourselves. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.